The USS Vanguard plummeted through the toxic skies of Terixus, its hull screaming against the planet's relentless pull. Inside, Captain Alex Hayes gripped the armrest of his command chair, his knuckles white under the strain. The crash was inevitable. Systems had failed, the engines were dead, and the DRA car's attack had left them with no other options. Brace for impact. Hayes barked over the cacophony of alarms and the groaning ship. The crash hit like a tidal wave. Metal tore, sparks flew, and the crew was thrown violently against their restraints. When the chaos settled, the ship lay broken on an alien landscape, smoke curling into the sky like a funeral pyre. Hayes released his harness, his head pounding. Around him, the bridge was in ruins, flickering screens casting eerie shadows. "You alive, Carter?" Hayes rasped. Major Ethan Carter, slumped against a bulkhead, raised a hand. "Barely, but I'll take it." Sergeant Matt Briggs stumbled in from the corridor, blood streaking his forehead. "Everyone in the rear compartments made it, sir. But we've got casualties in engineering. Ship's done for." Hayes nodded grimly. "We'll mourn later. Right now, we move." The team assembled on the planet's surface, stepping into a world that seemed intent on rejecting their presence. The air was thick and acrid, forcing them to wear emergency respirators. The ground was an unnatural purple, dotted with jagged black crystals that glowed faintly, casting an eerie light on the desolate plains. Violent storms churned on the horizon, streaking the sky with green lightning. Dr. Noah Green crouched to examine the terrain, his analytical mind already racing. "This soil's riddled with unknown compounds. Could be useful, if it doesn't kill us first." "Focus on staying alive first, Doc," Sergeant Briggs grunted, hefting his plasma rifle. "This place looks like it wants to eat us." Hayes scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes catching movement in the distance. DR car patrols, 8 feet of muscle and scaled armor, bristling with weapons designed to kill efficiently. They were hunting survivors. "West," Hayes called, turning to the youngest member of the group, Corporal Jake West. "Can you get a signal out?" West shook his head, his hands working feverishly on a portable comm unit. "Beacons fried, sir. And whatever's in this atmosphere is scrambling our tech." "That's not an accident," Carter said darkly. "The DR car want to make sure no one calls for help." The DRA car had been a looming shadow in humanity's expansion into the stars, a species bent on conquest and annihilation. Dozens of civilizations had fallen to their ruthless campaigns. For the DRA car, humans were just another pest to be eradicated. "They're underestimating us," Hayes said, his voice steady despite the weight of their predicament. "And we're going to make them regret it." Their first priority was shelter, using fragments of the ship and scavenge materials. The team constructed a crude but functional base against a rocky outcrop. Dr. Green rigged up an air filtration system, using parts salvaged from the Vanguard's life support, while Briggs and Carter reinforced the perimeter with makeshift barriers. As night fell, the planet revealed new horrors. Predatory creatures emerged, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. The team took shifts, standing guard against the alien wildlife while planning their next move. "Hayes," Green said quietly as they studied the DR car patrols from their shelter, "we need a plan. If they find us, we won't survive a direct fight. Then we make sure they don't see it coming," Hayes replied. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A DR car scouting party approached under cover of darkness, their advanced sensors sweeping the area. Hayes motioned for silence, signaling the team to spread out. Briggs set the first trap, a rigged fuel cell from the Vanguard hidden under loose debris. As the DR car stepped over it, the explosion lit up the night, scattering the patrol. Carter took advantage of the confusion, leading a flanking maneuver that cut down 2 more. When the dust settled, the humans stood victorious, breathing hard but unbroken. "First blood," Briggs muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Hayes crouched by the wreckage of a DR car soldier, inspecting the aliens' gear. Their weapons were advanced, their armor nearly impenetrable. But they weren't invincible. "We'll need more than luck to survive the next one," Hayes said. "Green, see if you can figure out how this tech works. West, I want you to try hacking into their comms." Hours later, West's persistence paid off. He intercepted a transmission. The DRA car planned to sweep the area at dawn, deploying reinforcements to ensure no survivors. "They think we're just prey," Carter said grimly, listening to the guttural alien voices. Hayes stood, his face set with determination. "They're wrong. We're not just going to survive. We're going to show them what happens when you corner humans. Prepare yourselves. By this time tomorrow, they'll wish they'd left us alone." The team rallied, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of Hayes' resolve. They had less than 24 hours to turn the tide, but if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was doing the impossible with nothing. The DR car patrol swept the barren plains of Terixus with mechanical precision, their armored forms moving like shadows under the storm-choked sky. In the distance, hidden in a jagged ravine, the humans worked tirelessly, their ingenuity and desperation driving them forward. Every ticking second felt like a countdown to their potential annihilation. Dr. Noah Green hunched over a disassembled DRA car weapon, his hands moving with surgical precision. "Their tech is biomechanical," he said, voice strained with concentration. "Half machine, half organic. It's self-repairing, but if we reverse engineer the energy source, we might have a chance at something big." "Define big, Doc," Sergeant Matt Briggs said as he adjusted the scope on his rifle. "Big enough to level the playing field," Green replied without looking up. "Maybe even tip it in our favor." Captain Alex Hayes paced nearby, scanning the ravine's entrance for any sign of movement. His presence was steadying, a constant reminder of the discipline that had kept them alive thus far. "Focus on results," he said evenly. "We don't have time for theories." Corporal Jake West, crouched by a portable console, smirked. "You should have been a motivational speaker, Captain." Hayes shot him a look. "And you should be hacking faster." West's grin faded, and he tapped furiously at his console. "Almost there. The DRA car's comm encryption is a nightmare, but I'm starting to crack it. If I can get into their system, we'll know exactly where they're weakest." Major Ethan Carter, always the strategist, leaned over a hastily drawn map on the ground. "We don't just need weaknesses. We need unpredictability. The DR car fight like machines. If we can exploit that, we can outmaneuver them." "Easier said than done," Briggs muttered. "They've got numbers, tech, and armor we can barely dent. That's why we don't fight them head-on," Hayes said. "We fight on our terms." "Green, how's that power core coming?" Green wiped his forehead, smudging grease across his brow. "It's unstable, but it'll work. If we rig this into a focused charge, we'll have a weapon strong enough to take out their reinforcements. I'm calling it the equalizer." The name hung in the air, a promise of retribution. Hayes nodded. "Good. Keep working. Carter, you and Briggs start setting traps along their patrol routes. We'll hit them hard and fast, then fall back to give Green time to finish the equalizer." As the team dispersed, the tension in the air was palpable. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating on borrowed time, but none of them voiced the doubts that lingered in the back of their minds. Survival required absolute focus. Hours later, the first phase of their plan came into play. Carter and Briggs led a hit-and-run attack on a DRA car patrol, drawing the enemy into a narrow canyon. Explosions rocked the terrain as carefully planted charges sent boulders crashing down, cutting off the DRA car's retreat. "Perfect setup," Carter said, his voice calm despite the chaos. He motioned to Briggs. "Take the left flank. I'll cover the right." Briggs grinned, hefting a plasma grenade. "I live for this." The DRA car regrouped quickly, their disciplined movements a stark contrast to the humans' calculated chaos. But it wasn't enough. Briggs's relentless assault and Carter's precision fire overwhelmed them, leaving the alien soldiers in disarray. Back at the ravine, West finally broke through the DRA car's encryption. His console lit up with streams of alien data, and a grim smile spread across his face. "Captain, you're gonna love this," Wes called. "I've got their patrol schedules, supply lines, and reinforcement plans. These guys run on efficiency, but it makes them predictable." Hayes stepped over, his gaze sharp. "Send it to Carter. Let's make sure the DR car, regret relying on routines." While the others executed the next phase of the plan, Green worked feverishly to stabilize the equalizer. Every piece of alien technology he integrated into the device seemed to fight back, as though the DRA car's weapons were alive and resisting their repurposing. "This isn't just engineering," Green muttered to himself. "It's like they designed these systems to reject anything that isn't DR car." But he pressed on, his determination unshaken. Humans had always thrived by turning challenges into opportunities, and Green was no exception. By the time Carter and Briggs returned, the equalizer was nearing completion. They brought with them salvaged DRA car supplies, including additional weapons and armor. "Pick these off their dead," Briggs said, dropping the gear onto the ground. "They won't be needing them." "Good work," Hayes said, inspecting the haul. "We'll need every advantage for what's coming." The team gathered as Green activated the equalizer for a test run. The device hummed with raw energy, its core glowing a dangerous blue. "It's not pretty," Green said, stepping back, "but it'll work." Hayes crouched beside the device, his expression unreadable. "How long do we have before the DR car send reinforcements?" Wes glanced at his console. 12 hours, give or take. "They're already mobilizing." "Then we don't wait for them to find us," Hayes said, standing. "We take the fight to them." The plan was simple but audacious. Use the equalizer to disrupt the DRA car's main supply line, forcing them to spread their forces thin. With the enemy divided, the team could strike key targets and buy themselves enough time to escape the planet. As they prepared for the assault, a quiet determination settled over the group. They were exhausted, battered, and facing insurmountable odds, but the spark of defiance in their eyes burned brighter than ever. "We've got one shot at this," Hayes said, addressing the team. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to show the DR car what it means to stand against humanity. They think we're weak. Let's prove them wrong." The team moved out under the cover of darkness, their movements precise and coordinated. The equalizer was their ace in the hole, a weapon born of desperation and ingenuity. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. By dawn, they were in position, ready to unleash chaos on the DR car. Their resolve was unshakable, their unity unbreakable. Whatever happened next, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The sun rose over Tyryxus, its weak, sickly light casting long shadows across the jagged landscape. The DR car supply depot loomed ahead, a fortress of alien design bristling with weaponry and surrounded by patrolling guards. From their vantage point atop a rocky outcrop, Captain Alex Hayes and his team prepared for the final stage of their plan. The equalizer hummed ominously in the center of their makeshift camp, its unstable core pulsing with energy. "West, status report," Hayes said, crouching low as he scanned the enemy's movements through his binoculars. Corporal Jake West tapped his portable console, eyes glued to the stream of DR car comms he had infiltrated. "They're still running standard patrol patterns. No sign they know we're here. Reinforcements are en route, though. ETA 4 hours. Hayes lowered the binoculars, his jaw tightening. "Then we need to hit them hard and fast." "Green, is the equalizer ready?" Dr. Noah Green adjusted the makeshift controls he'd rigged to the device, his hands steady despite the tension in the air. "As ready as it'll ever be. Once it's armed, we'll have about 5 minutes to get clear before it detonates." Major Ethan Carter knelt beside the map they'd spread out on the ground, tracing potential escape routes with his finger. "We'll need a distraction to draw their forces away from the depot. Briggs and I can handle that. Wes, you stay here and keep feeding us intel." Sergeant Matt Briggs grinned, shouldering his plasma rifle. Nothing like causing a little chaos to start the day. Hayes nodded. Stick to the plan. Green, arm the equalizer, but wait for my signal to activate it. Carter, Briggs, make it loud. Wes, keep us updated on any changes. The team moved out with practiced efficiency, their footsteps muffled by the uneven terrain. Carter and Briggs veered to the left, circling wide toward the DRA car's outer defenses. The first explosion shook the ground minutes later, a plume of fire and smoke rising into the sky as DRA car soldiers scrambled to respond. Direct hit on their supply cache, Wes reported through their comms. They're pulling units from the depot to investigate. Hayes led Green and Wes down a narrow ravine, using the confusion to approach the depot undetected. The DRA cars' imposing structures loomed above them, their surfaces gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Green, set the equalizer here, Hayes ordered, pointing to a cluster of conduits feeding into the depot's central power core. This'll maximize the damage. As Green worked, Wes monitored the DRA car's movements. They're starting to catch on. Reinforcements are doubling back. Briggs, Carter, status? Hayes asked, keeping his voice low. Still holding their attention, Carter replied, the sound of gunfire in the background. But we're running out of explosives and patience. Hayes smirked despite the gravity of the situation. Just a little longer. Green finished arming the equalizer, stepping back with a look of grim satisfaction. It's ready. 5 minutes once I hit the switch. Hold off for now, Hayes said. Wes, get us a clean exit route. Before Wes could respond, the air filled with the guttural roars of DR car soldiers closing in. Hayes spun, raising his weapon as the first wave of enemies crested the ridge. Plasma fire lit up the ravine, the DRA cars' sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm them. Green, cover West. West, work faster, Hayes barked, firing into the advancing horde. Green pulled out a modified DRA car weapon, its unfamiliar weight awkward in his hands. He fired sporadically, each shot buying precious seconds as Wes frantically typed on his console. They've locked down most of the escape routes, Wes said, sweat beading on his forehead. But there's a gap to the east if we move now. Not yet, Hayes growled. Carter, Briggs, fall back to the rendezvous point. We're pulling out in 3 minutes. About time, Briggs said, his voice strained but defiant. The fight was brutal, each second stretching into an eternity. Hayes and Green held their ground, their combined firepower barely keeping the DR car at bay. Finally, Carter and Briggs appeared, their armor scorched and their faces streaked with grime. Nice party, Briggs quipped, blasting a DR car soldier who had gotten too close. Hope we're leaving soon. Hayes nodded to Green. Do it. Green hit the switch, and the equalizer's core flared to life, its energy output spiking dangerously. A high-pitched whine filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Move! Hayes shouted, leading the team toward the eastern gap. The DR car pursued relentlessly, their roars of rage echoing across the ravine. Wes directed the team through a series of narrow passages, each step taking them closer to safety as the equalizer counted down to detonation. They cleared the last ridge just as the explosion erupted behind them. The shockwave knocked them off their feet, a blinding light swallowing the depot and its surrounding defenses. When the dust settled, the once imposing DR car stronghold was nothing more than a smoldering crater. The team lay sprawled on the ground, breathing heavily. Hayes was the first to rise, his expression hard but triumphant. West, status. West checked his console, a tired grin spreading across his face. No sign of reinforcements. We just wiped out their command center. Hell of a job, Carter said, pulling himself to his feet. Briggs clapped Green on the shoulder. Not bad for a guy who prefers microscopes to guns. Green chuckled weakly, his hands still trembling. Let's not make a habit of it. Hayes looked out at the distant horizon, his mind already calculating their next move. We're not out of this yet. They'll send more. But now they know what we're capable of. Carter stepped beside him, a rare smile tugging at his lips. And they'll think twice before underestimating us again. As the team began their trek toward a distant signal, possibly another chance at escape, they carried with them the weight of their victory and the hope it represented. In just 24 hours, they had done what no species had dared. They had turned the tide against the DRA car, and humanity's fight was far from over.